This is Brenna Quigley, your personal geologist and terroir guide. Join me on a road trip through the geologic history of your favorite wine regions around the world. This is Roadside Terroir. Cow horns filled with crystals buried under a full moon. Potions brewed of chamomile, stinging nettle, and fermented cow manure. Energizing vortexes and humans developing the characteristics of the animals that fertilize their foods. Are these instructions from a magical book of spells or a practical guide to viticulture? Hi everyone, and happy Halloween. Today we're going to explore the witchy world of biodynamics and see if we can convince you that there just might be room for both the practical and the spiritual in the world of viticulture. In reality, it's actually a bit of a coincidence that this episode release happens to fall on Halloween. So, in the spirit of the supernatural, we're going to take that as a sign from the cosmos. Welcome back to Roadside Terroir, Season 3, Farming for Terroir. This multi-part series on the intricacies of farming philosophies is brought to you thanks to the wonderful team at Becky Wasserman and Company. Thank you for sponsoring this work and for all of the work you do to push the boundaries of farming throughout our industry. In addition to the commentary you're about to hear, we utilized lots of resources for this episode. Primarily, Jamie Good's The New Viticulture. We'll include the full list of books, articles, and papers in the show notes and on our website so you can read along with us. If you are looking for more Roadside Terroir, please consider becoming a Roadside Insider, where you get access to exclusive bonus content including extended interviews, maps, travel guides, and invites to exclusive events and travel opportunities. Check out our website, roadsideterroir.com, to learn more. As always, don't drink and drive, and remember to keep your eyes on the road. This episode contains explicit language. In episode 5, we discussed the progression from pre-industrial agriculture to industrial or conventional agriculture to the rise of the modern-day organic movement. By looking at the early history of farming, we were able to see how dramatically the farming landscape was changed by conventional farming. From the real dangers of farming with harmful chemicals to broken ecological cycles on a global scale, conventional farming is literally not a sustainable solution if we want to continue to live on this planet. And if that doesn't spook you, I'm not sure what will. Throughout his career, Rodrigo Soto of Farm Mountain Wines has overseen the conversion of over 3,000 acres, or over 1,200 hectares, of vineyards from conventional to organic and biodynamic practices in both the northern and southern hemispheres.
Everything is up for interpretation, but basically, for me, organic farming is the same strategy of conventional farming with organic products. So they are products that are not harming the environment, which I think is a great achievement.
So far, we've discovered that while much of the philosophy behind organic farming strives to bring agriculture back to a more holistic process, the certifications for organic farming can only take this idea so far, and organic farming alone is unlikely to be enough to save the planet.
Now, biodynamic farming, in my opinion, is a very different strategy because you are making interpretations of the cycles of your property that is immersed in a broader environment. And you are trying to read those cycles in anticipation of the events that will happen. So your strategy is not reactive, it's proactive in terms of your farming techniques. And then you have other elements that are trying to close the cycles of fertility in a property, which is very, very important in my opinion.
Biodynamics, by definition, requires that the farmer look at the farm as an interconnected system that can support itself. It looks at the farm as an organism and strives to remain self-contained. What Rodrigo means by closing the cycles of fertility is that in biodynamics you aim to not bring in any inputs, like synthetic fertilizer. and instead create your own fertility, like with compost. The same goes for pest management. Instead of bringing in something to kill off disease and fungus, biodynamics urges you to improve the system with natural predators and canopy management that create their own sense of balance.
When we think about fertility, we tend to disconnect that with the place. But at the very end, if you think about it, it's the base of what we do in terms of growth and crop. So when you accept that your property has a given fertility, and that doesn't have anything to do with your spreadsheet and your yields that you have pictured for your business model. It's a very honest model towards a sense of place, or what people call in biodynamics the individuality of the place.
Even though we often think of biodynamics as a more advanced form of organics, it was actually the first form of documented organic farming. The concept wasn't developed by a farmer at all, but by the Austrian philosopher Rudolf Steiner. Steiner's greater philosophy is called anthroposophy, and it wasn't until late in his career and life that Steiner began to speak about agriculture. Steiner's agricultural course is based on a series of 8 lectures he held in 1924 in the then German town of Koberwitz for more than 100 anthroposophically versed farmers. Think of it as a 10-day masterclass with lectures, workshops, and shared meals, where discussions about the cosmos and karma would continue over candlelight after dinner. Steiner's teachings put the human at the center of his philosophy, a human that he saw as consisting not only of a physical body, but of an emotional soul, an underlying life force, and a conscious, thinking mind. Steiner is said to have been intrigued by the opportunity to make his teachings more practical, and farming seemed like a particularly good way to do so. He believed that life on Earth needs the cosmos to thrive, the sun, the moon, the planets, and the stars, and envisioned a way of farming that uses their rhythms to produce food and drink that nourished humans in all their ways of being, not just the physical. We've interacted with many biodynamic farmers on this show, from Rodrigo Soto in this season to Gina Juni here on the central coast of California in Season 1, to Aubert de Villaine of Domaine della Romani Conti in Season 2. Each biodynamic farmer has their own relationship to anthroposophy, with some being deep believers and others sticking to the more practical points. In Season 2, we walked through the vineyards of Volnay with the renowned biodynamic farmer and winemaker Frédéric Lafarge and his daughter Clotilde, including this particularly special planting in his parcel of Caire. Wow, the clouds are so dramatic.
Yeah, but at least we have a little bit of sun, which is nice.
Perfect timing.
And it will be on the left, in the corner, after the door.
25-30 centimeters of soil, and after we have the limestone mother rock. And the name is Caire because we have a lot of minerality in the wine, always, yes.
Their parcel is on a very flat section of the vineyard, and part of it has recently been replanted in a manner unlike anything that has ever been done in the Côte d'Or. Instead of neat, straight rows, the new vines have been planted in a perfect spiral.
This old vine has 64 years old. And after, you have the new parcel planted in 20 and planted in spiral. And if you hold, we can walk, we don't speak, and after we speak. Okay? Yeah. Okay. It's an experience.
We walk silently, winding our way around the edge of the vineyard towards its center.
We have a lot of energy and it's a very quiet. And I think after for the grape for two, it's better because we have very good expression of the terroir with the energy of the place. I have a dream. In the biodynamic, we work a lot with the vortex and all civilization in South America and the Maya work with the circle. And I think it's very interesting, and I'm very happy it's possible in the Cairo.
So, of course, it's all by horse and by hand.
Yes.
Clotilde tells me later that this has been a dream of her father's for probably 20 years.
And now we are the Mother Rock. It's a very zen, very meditative place.
We head back to the cellar, rethinking everything we thought we knew and everything we thought was possible in the Côte d'Or. In order to gain a deeper understanding of the philosophy behind biodynamic viticulture, we wanted to speak with a farmer who really lives and breathes these ideals. Our Berlin-based production assistant, Paul Knittel, took the lead in speaking with Andreas Schumann, winemaker at Odinstal.
Odinstal is a fascinating winery. They're pretty much as biodynamic as it gets, and a lot of people might actually think of them as one of the more natural wine producers in Germany. But in 2021, they also joined the VDP, a German association of usually more classically inclined wineries. To me, they really show that great farming and clean winemaking can blur some of these old dividing lines. When I visited Odinstal a couple of years ago, I actually missed Andreas by a couple of days, so I was very happy that he now made the time to talk biodynamics with me.
My name is Andreas Schumann, and I'm working here at Odinstal. Odinstal is a small winery in Pfalz, in the what we call Mittelhart, so in the center of Pfalz in Wachenheim. But we're not in the village, we're above the village, and the winery is more or less like an island up in the forest. So usually in this area with forest from 200 meters altitude on, and Odinstal is like an island up on 350 meters altitude, next to an old volcano surrounded by meadow and forest. So we have in total around 17 hectares up here that we own, just 5.2 hectares of wines. And the rest is more or less meadow and forest, so a lot of space for biodiversity. Our owners, the Hensel family, the couple Ute and Thomas, they fell in love with this place in the 90s and wanted to buy it, to live there. And of course liked also the idea to own a winery. Yeah, the house, the villa is around 200 years old, and it's overlooking the whole Rhine River Valley. So quite an impressive view from up here.
Today, Andreas is considered one of the world's most respected experts on biodynamic farming, but he was far from convinced when he first arrived at the vineyard in 2004.
Yeah, we began here in 2004 and took over vineyards that have been run organically for a long time. So the former owners, the Sieben family from Biodynamics, they began already in the late 80s with organic farming, and the vineyards are certified organic as long as certification exists, so since 1992. So we already had a good potential. And yeah, we began in that time when the biodynamic viticulture wave more or less swapped over to Germany, and we were in the lucky situation that we are in the same village like Birk den Wolf, and they started their conversation and they engaged for 1 year Georg Meissner to help them in the conversation. And so I met Georg and we exchanged a lot, and he was already a big brain in biodynamics, as he still is. He's probably today one of the most important persons we have in European biodynamic viticulture. And I was very interested in what they do, but it did not really touch me. But I began to educate myself, to visit seminars, to read books, because I felt, okay, we are already working organically, and that would be probably the next step. And if you look around in the world of wine, which wineries in that time worked biodynamically, that was just the big names like DRC, Leroy, Sint-Humbrecht, Foradori, and all the wineries like that always really impressed me. And so I said, okay, they must have a reason to work like that. It must have a certain benefit. And then in 2006, we had a horrible hailstorm on the 2nd of June. And after that, the vineyards looked like in winter. There was not even one leaf left, no green plant material at all, no flowers, no grapes left. And then I called Georg and said, okay, now let's try out your hocus pocus, because I will not have any yield anyway. So we used a bit of field spray preparations and a bit of nettle tea and things like that. And in a very short time, just a few weeks later, we've rebuilt the whole canopy. And in the end, after harvest, we ended with 30% yield. And our calculation was 0 yield. So I realized that something of that hocus pocus obviously worked.
Let's start digging a little deeper into what that hocus pocus, the more spiritual side of biodynamics, is about. Generally speaking, biodynamic farming looks to produce food and drink that nourishes not only our physical body, but our mind and spirit as well. A farm that can produce this kind of food would be a healthy, self-perpetuating system, a farm organism that is uniquely adapted and continuously adapting to its environment. The farmer would keep this organism healthy by bringing it into balance instead of merely treating the symptoms of imbalances. To achieve this balance, each part, human, animal, and plant, should contribute to the whole in a way that suits its essence of being. And this essence of being is something the farmer can learn about by interacting with the environment with an anthroposophically trained eye. This includes understanding the cosmic forces the farm organism is embedded in. Some of them, like the sun rhythm, move very slowly. The summer and the winter solstice are important turning points each year, where the days start becoming shorter or longer, as are the equinoxes in spring and autumn, after which either days or nights become longer than the other.
The bigger the rhythm is, the more important it is. So most important is the sun rhythm. You can see it very easy in all quality wine regions of the world over many decades and centuries. There were established leading varieties that were in this region completely in the sun rhythm. Where the buds started to get bigger when the days become longer than the nights around Easter, where flowering was about midsummer, and where harvest ripeness was when the nights get longer than the days in the second half of September. And they were totally, nothing was on the darkest point of the year. Climate warming mixed that up, of course, a lot. Yeah. But if you see in the last century, when we were talking about the great and long-lasting vintages, it was always the very early vintages, because in all regions around the world, people were used to start harvesting like second, third week of October and harvesting throughout October and into November and things like that. Then you can, of course, have a look on the moon that we mostly use to decide when we use the field spray preparations, that we also use for cellar work. If we want to keep a wine reductive and compact, we move it around new moon or around a moon-Saturn opposition. When a wine is very reductive and we want it to open up a bit more, then we move it with a full moon, where you have more this expansion processes, and on the new moon you have more the concentration processes. That's the main thing that we do around those planetary rhythms. You can, of course, also look at the animal circle and the different planets, but that can make you really mad, because we're working outside in the fields. So most important for us is what's the weather like? And then you look into your moon calendar and define exactly that day that is so perfect that you really look forward to that day, and then it's raining that day and you can do what you want to do. So we try to not to do important works on all the, when you have planet nodes and the days are really bad, but that's just 2-3 days per month in average. The rest we just do our work, and we're happy when we have beautiful weather or to work outside. We're happy for the plants when it's raining, but not so happy for us when we need to work outside when it's raining. But that's agriculture. That's how it is.
Should the organism suffer some kind of ailment or imbalance, Steiner offers remedies in the form of elaborate preparations or concoctions of natural products, often fermented underground in vessels like horns or organs, and then sprayed onto plants and soils or added to compost.
The preparations themselves are another major piece of biodynamic farming and can also be the most polarizing. Some more classically trained minds are turned off by the witchy ingredients and celestial timings that these processes require. Here is a quick breakdown of the 9 biodynamic preparations simplified from the Demeter USA website. BD 500. Cow horns packed with cow manure and buried in a well-drained soil. Bury horns in the fall and recover in the spring when the manure has become humus. BD 501. Pulverize silica from crystals of either quartz or feldspar to a fine paste and pack into a cow horn. Bury in spring and recover in the fall. BD 502. Fresh yarrow flowers stuffed into a stag's bladder and dried in the sun for 1 summer, then buried for 1 winter. BD 503. Chamomile flowers stuffed into cow intestines and tied, a la sausages, and bury for 1 winter. BD 504. Stinging nettles buried for 1 full year. BD 505. Oak bark packed into the skull of a cow, goat, or pig, buried in muddy earth for fall and winter. BD 506. Dandelion heads sewed or wrapped into bovine mesentery, buried for 1 winter. BD 507. Juice of valerian. BD 508. Tea of Equisetum arvenes. In general, these preparations are harvested and then made into a tea, which involves brewing and or dynamizing with water. Dynamization is a particular process of stirring that involves rhythmically creating alternating clockwise and counterclockwise vortexes. This process is believed to not only oxygenate and thoroughly mix the components, but to also energize, restructure, and activate the preparation before spraying it onto the plants, soil, or compost. The 500 and 501 preparations are typically considered the most important for viticulture.
For me, the 501 preparation helps to keep the vigor organized. So in all the times when you have unbalanced vigor, when it's getting, for example, too strong, or when you have a chaos like the flowering process that you need to reorganize, which brings more precision into the vigor and into the plant, and at the end then into the wine. That's the idea behind 501. Organization and precision. And you have 2 effects from the preparations. You have, of course, effects, also ingredients that you can analyze. And obviously see if it's about enzymatics in the soil, or if it's about which are plants or similar to plant hormones, which substances are in the preparation that you can all, of course, analyze. And you find in the 501, you find plant hormones like auxine and things like that in a very small dose, but you find them, and you find others in the 500. But you cannot analyze the spiritual effects. That's much more difficult to find a method to analyze that and to make a scientific trial around that.
According to Steiner, our food affects us on more than just a physical level. It affects us emotionally and spiritually, and the way we grow our food and keep our animals further shapes that influence.
And though the animals don't have this I individuality, everything that the meadow that they eat up offers to build up and feed this potential of building up an I individuality, that stays in the manure, and that we can use to fertilize. But the big amount of ruminant manure this should really go as a fertilizer to our ground food, to the potatoes, to the wheat, to the corn, to the things we eat in big amounts. So it gives us, as a society, the ability to build up strong, willing individuals that are able to have a social life. Because if we are like the animals, I don't want to live in a society like that. So it has an impact on our social life, how we fertilize our food. And of course, it gives the character also of this meadow to the food. You have a food from a certain region that has a certain character and builds up characters of the people who come from that region.
Many of the spiritual connections biodynamics highlights between the farmer and the land are, in a sense, wholesome. But critics of biodynamics point out that Steiner was not himself a farmer, and that many of his teachings are considered pseudo-scientific and pseudo-historic. As you get deeper into the philosophic teachings of anthroposophy, things start to get pretty dark. Steiner was a self-proclaimed clairvoyant, and to many, a charlatan. Today, many consider his writings about race and hierarchy to be disturbingly racist at best. Unfortunately for biodynamic farming, these real concerns have been hard to shake. Regardless of where you stand on the esoteric aspects, there is still a strong case for the very real and tangible results of biodynamic farming.
What I described was more the spiritual effect. And then you can also, of course, look at the potential that you can see that growing of the roots is stimulated by 500, so you get a more intense connection with the soil. That's a big benefit because we want to taste at the end where the wine is growing, and if it's connected more intense where it grows on, you can feel it, of course, also more in the wine. And if you have bigger root system at the end, you have more organic matter because you don't only spray on the vines because you have all the cover crops in between. They build up more roots, so you get more organic matter in the soil, more humus, and your soil gets healthier and more resilient, and not only against drought because it can keep more water. Also, you have a better infiltration, you have less erosion on heavy rainfalls and all those things. So there's a lot of benefits. And then you can see in the end that you have more balance in the plant and your plant is more resilient. It looks a bit more precise, and usually you have lower yield, but you have more intensity and energy in the vines.
In his book, The New Viticulture, Jamie Good writes, biodynamics has often been attacked by the scientific viticultural establishment as nonsense. But if you look at the emerging science of the rhizosphere and also the details of plant immunity, then suddenly you can envisage a way that the effects of biodynamics can be explained using science. Jamie continues to explain that there is evidence that, and quote, some preparations are acting as a source of microbial inoculation, enhancing the life of both the soil and the vine, end quote. This is kind of like the vineyard version of taking a probiotic. Other preparations are thought to work as elicitors, or something like a molecular alarm system that puts the vine on high alert, making it more resilient to diseases. While the mechanisms of exactly how all of this works are only being discovered now, the overall farming results have been evident for decades. J.P. Reganold wrote a paper back in 1993 titled Effects of Biodynamic and Conventional Farming on Soil Quality in New Zealand, where he concludes the biodynamic farms, not specifically vineyards, had, quote, soils of higher biological and physical quality, greater organic matter content and microbial activity, better soil structure, lower bulk density, easier penetratability, and greater depth of topsoil, end quote. He also determined that most of the biodynamic farms he studied were just as financially viable as their conventional neighbors. In Germany, there's a famous experimental vineyard called In Biodyne, run by the Viticultural Research Institute at Geisenheim. They have been running a long-term side-by-side comparison of conventional organic and biodynamic grape farming since 2006. They found, after just 4 years of conversion, that the vines in the biodynamic plots had notably changed morphology in a way that increased the grapes' exposure to light. The biodynamic vines also have smaller berries and less compact bunches, which altogether decreases their susceptibility to acetic acid rot and botrytis. Scientific trials aside, highly experienced tasters from around the world agree that there's something special about biodynamic wines. Many people, myself included, have been moved to tears by great bottles that have been produced biodynamically. As we've already seen with organic farming, there's often a disconnect between philosophy, practice, and certification. Here's Paul Wasserman.
So biodynamics is an incredibly rich and complex universe that goes way beyond farming into spirituality, into how you lead your life, into education. And some of it sounds very woohoo and people like to make fun of it. When it comes to farming, if you look at Demeter's website, it proposes this really magical universe with biodiversity, with animals, etc. But when you look strictly at biodynamic certification, it's, how can I put it? It's almost sad and very limited compared to the proposed universe. So certification. In France, there are two, Biodivin and Demeter, but you will only see Demeter in the US because apparently Demeter has trademarked the word biodynamics. So you can't even put biodynamics on the back label of a Biodivin certified wine, which I guess I find a little naughty and contrary to this great spirit. Broadly speaking, the first requirement for both is that you need to be organic certified before you can start biodynamic certification. And then you need to use biodynamic preparations, not that many of them. 500, which is the infamous cow dung that you bury underground. The second one is the 501, which is ground quartz crystals. That's it for biodynamic preparations. I believe that at Biodivin, you have to spray the Marie Attune preparation, which is a boosted 500. But in essence, that's it. However, you also need to compost, specifically at Demeter, and you can buy that pre-made with not many requirements. But if you make it yourself, you have to spray it with other preparations, which are 502 to 507. The list of products you can use in vineyards and the winery are much more restrictive than for organic certification. For Demeter, in the winery, there were only 3 products you could use, in theory, and those were SO2, bentonite for fining, and pea protein for fining as well. And of course, I mean the vegetable. So this has recently changed to a point system, meaning that every intervention, whether it be filtration or the products they use, are graded from 1 to 2 points, including the 3 products that were priorly authorized. And they have a maximum of 5 points to use up.
As Paul mentioned, many of these biodynamic preparations, what might be considered the heart of the biodynamic philosophy, are available to order online. No cow horn dung stuffing required. While this is certainly convenient for some, others believe that it clashes with the whole idea of a farm ecosystem.
Of course, a lot of committed biodynamic farmers go way, way further than the certification requirements. And biodynamics offers a wealth of pathways towards things like regenerative, biodiversity, integrating animals, animal welfare, and also trying to keep a closed circle on what you're going to use for biodynamic farming. For example, foraging for your own plants, for the preparations. If you're making your own compost, trying to find manure locally or raising your own animals, etc.
It should also be noted that, as with any certification process, there's a significant financial component to becoming certified biodynamic. And as Demeter has even copyrighted the term biodynamics, there are certainly many producers who follow biodynamic practices and philosophies, but aren't interested in becoming certified. And, as we mentioned before, there's also a strong contingent of producers who are incredibly invested in natural farming, soil health, and the like. But because they're morally opposed to some of Steiner's philosophies, they actively prefer not to be associated with biodynamics at all. Here's Rodrigo Soto again.
The only way to do it is to check on your practices. But at the very end, the philosophical component is not accounted for. That's up for interpretation and for the farmer himself or herself in terms of, those are part of my philosophy and I will apply it through this process. But think about biodynamics as a technique. And it's a technique that you can apply following a list of things to do, or you can apply following part of your instincts and your beliefs.
All of this suggests that it's really up to the person how much they dedicate themselves and their farming to the true philosophy behind biodynamics.
I'm happy about everyone who decides to work biodynamically, because it's a big benefit for our soils, for the healthiness, for our agricultural fields. Of course, the preparations have positive effects, but this is more or less like a cooking recipe that you can use very easy in German climatic conditions. It usually works, but you can have a lot more benefits from the preparations. But to decide when to do it, you have to dive a bit deeper and try to understand the preparations.
As we look deeper into the details, we see that terroir is absolutely critical to the understanding of biodynamics as well as its implementation. At Odinstal, Andreas and his team gradually increased their dedication to the terroir as they developed their own preparations over time.
Of course, in the first year, that was not really proper biodynamic work. What we did was just fish preparations from the mail order. And then we decided to begin, and in the next year, we started to do our own compost. We started then in the following years collaborations with farmers, one to bring us cows to grass down our meadows, and to use, of course, also the manure then for the preparations. And then we started a collaboration with a beekeeper to have bees around the vineyards and in the cover crops. Yeah, then we changed the farmer to one that also slaughters the cows after the grazing season. So we were able to get organs for the compost preparations that already had metabolized our farm and our grass. So a very, very closed circle regarding that. And then we began to keep our own chicken. And today we have chickens and also some ducks. And we began another collaboration with a shepherd. So today we can also grass down the cover crops in winter with sheep. And after 1-2 years, we began to make our own horn manure. And then today we go out to a friend's farm, like 56 kilometers north, in an area where you can find crystals on the acres. And we go out for one day with the whole team and collect the crystals and bring them to a special mill. So we have our own 501. And then with this beautiful place we have and all the surroundings, we find almost all the plants and herbs you need for the other biodynamic preparations. So we can collect them where they are growing wild, so they decided themselves that they want to grow on this place. So we collect our dandelion flowers, our yarrow flowers, stinging nettle, oak bark. We find everything around the house, even valerian. The only thing we don't find, so we need to bring it from somewhere else, is chamomile. Because chamomile is a pioneer plant growing on the worst soil. So we're very happy that it doesn't grow too much up here. So it's a good, that tells something good about our soil work. So if you take this farm individuality concept for serious, then you should, of course, try to have your own preparations, all the field spray and compost preparations, because the plants you use and the manure that is coming from a certain meadow also have this sense of the place inside them. And we're talking about, the podcast is also called Something with Terroir. We are talking about terroir. We want to have the sense of the place in the glass at the end. And if you take that serious and you have your own preparations, then of course you have a different preparation than your neighbor and your neighbor and your neighbor.
He also describes how your climate and terroir will influence the timing of the preparations that you use, particularly with the 501 silica spray.
It's much more efficient in the time where the wine is growing the fastest to protect it or to keep the precision in the vigor when the growing is finished and the grapes are just ripening. And especially if you go to warmer climatic situations and you spray it on the ripening grapes, it can even have a negative impact because you get too much sugar and you burn the leaves, things like that. It makes more concentration. So I think it has the biggest benefit when you spray it quite early. Yeah. And then if maturity is already high and you have hot climatic conditions, then don't spray it in the middle of summer. But if you have very hot conditions and the wines are suffering, they need to try to get a bit deeper with their roots and be more efficient in connecting with the soil and with the water content in the soil. There, the whole manure, the 500 preparation can help much more.
As we keep seeing, terroir dictates how you can farm, and biodynamic farming might take that more seriously than any other farming method we know.
There's a beautiful saying in biodynamics that as plants are committed to the place where they live because they cannot move, the plant kingdom doesn't move. They mirror their environment. And it's such a simple phrase, you realize that it means so much. And when you think about sense of origin or place or terroir, that makes a lot of sense to me.
In comparison to the cool, humid continental climate of Odinstal in Pfalz, Germany, Rodrigo Soto describes the biodynamic conversion projects he worked on early in his career in the dry, mountainous Mediterranean climate in Chile.
I knew a friend of mine that was starting a project in a new appellation in Chile, and they asked me if I was interested. So I interviewed with them and I took a true slideshow with myself with the images that I have taken at Seago at the time and working with organics and biodynamics. And they loved it and they really liked it. And that is how they asked me, okay, how we materialize this. I said, I know the person, his name is Alan York, and we hired him as a consultant and I'll be here to implement this model. And that's how we brought biodynamics to Chile for the first time, Brenna. And together with another larger conglomerate that was also interested, but we did it at a scale that it was remarkable.
The late Alan York was a student of English master gardener Alan Chadwick, who was a student of Steiner himself. Chadwick developed the university farm at the University of California, Santa Cruz. He rejected the most esoteric pieces of Steiner's philosophy, and York did so even further, but both believed in the practical farming aspects of farming for healthy soils and plants that biodynamics emphasizes. Alan York brought the concept of biodynamics to California vineyards and became a hugely respected figure in California viticulture, and later went on to consult in regions around the world.
For us, for you to picture, it was a lot of decomposed granite in the coastal range of Chile, which is a very old range, way older than the Andes Mountains. So root penetration for a young vineyard was something that was crucial for its survival.
As Rodrigo mentioned in the organics episode, the challenges of a Mediterranean climate are nearly opposite that of a continental climate. Disease pressure is typically very low, but because there's no rain during the growing season, there are often major challenges with fertility, which raises the stakes on the financial risks. Converting away from conventional farming is typically most difficult for the first 3 years, as the plants relearn how to survive without being spoon-fed. But even long-term, both organic and biodynamic farms tend to see a drop in yield by about 25% permanently. The yield is considered part of the terroir.
For me, it was very challenging, the properties in Casablanca. Casablanca is mostly sandy soils with very poor fertility. And I was working in a project at the time that the majority of the wine has low margins. So at the very end, the crop needed to have a certain floor in terms of yields. And that is one of the most challenging parts, Brenna, because what we did at the time is that we developed a massive compost facility in order to be able to fulfill the needs. And we were doing like 3,000 tons of compost in property. Not everybody can afford to do that. We figured out how to do it in a very efficient manner, but just think about the space that you need for all that. I mean, this was trucks and trucks and trucks of manure and other things that were being hauled around, and then we put it together and we did these massive piles, and then we have to monitor these piles for a long time and then apply them. So it was equipment that we didn't have, was logistics that were not applied. So at the very end, initially, the resistance to do these changes is massive. Cultural resistance. The company doesn't want to go through that hassle. Why we're doing this so complicated? Well, that's the only way to do it. But if you want to have, 8 tons to the hectare or stuff like that, that's the only way that we need to do it. At the very end, cost-wise, it's just different. It doesn't add cost in my experience, because at the very end, you're shifting one thing for the other one, but also your sources, your prime materials, are getting into wines that can afford a better pricing as well. And you're changing a lot of other things that are not accounted into the equation. And in some cases, you're extending the life of the vineyard and things like that.
But eventually, things get easier. Over time, the soil comes back to life. The vines begin to rely on their own immune systems, and the ecosystem of the vineyard begins to function once again.
So you're creating more work, but that more work felt so much more in sync with the processes that you were trying to guide through your farming practices in order to make those plants thrive. Now, what is that has to do with quality? Well, at the very end, you start learning and seeing that root penetration was deeper. Plants, they have less needs of certain things like irrigation at the time or foreign fertilization and elements like that. And then you start making the wines and you start finding certain connections. For me, when we were working on the creeks, and I was working with a cool climate Syrah, we were having a lot of native plants around the creeks, and we were just cleaning the creeks so that we can raise the height of the trees. And when we cut those few branches just to make the trees taller, the smells were incredibly spicy, very peppery. When I made my first Syrah from that location, it was incredibly peppery as well. It smells just like the forest. And that could have been a coincidence, or maybe not. But what made me believe is that everything was connected.
Thank you for listening to Roadside Terroir, and happy Halloween. We will be back with our final full episode of the season on December 5th. We'll be breaking down the world of soil health, agroforestry, regenerative farming, and much more. So you don't want to miss it. In the meantime, we'll be releasing lots of new bonus content for our Roadside Insiders, so make sure to tune in and consider signing up to become a Roadside Insider today. This episode is brought to you by the incredibly thoughtful team at Becky Wasserman & Company. Thank you all so much for your support. Thank you to our guests, Rodrigo Soto, Andreas Schumann, Frederic and Clotilde Lafarge, and Paul Wasserman. If you're enjoying this season, we would love to hear from you. Send us a message, or even better, give us a rating or a comment on your chosen streaming platform. It really does help. And don't forget to tell your friends. If you want to support the show, please consider becoming a Roadside Insider or donating to keep the farming content coming. You can find out about all of these options and more at our website, roadsideterroir.com. We would like to extend an extra special thank you to our Grand Cru patrons, Stephen and Amy Lippin. Thank you. Roadside Terroir is hosted and produced by me, Brenna Quigley, sound engineering, original music, and sound design by Jeff Alvarez, research, writing, and hosting support by Paul Knittel. Thank you to Claire Shaheen, Isa Islami, and everyone else who helped make this episode a reality.
Okay,
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for all of your time. And thank your daughter for lending her phone for an extra amount of time.
Now I'm going to have to do some damage control.
Yeah.
Breda, so I'm going to stop recording